would. All right. So Dearden, tell me, this is kind of a different one, kind of a tradition I have with my people. The
Sure.
last person I talk to in this capacity leaves a question for the first person, for the next person. And at the end, we'll do that. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm just warning you ahead of time.
Oh boy.
All right. So like I said, I sat down with ChatGPT. I put in all the information, the website, etc., who you played, who you ran, who you run, all these different things. And these are just some of the questions that come up. Okay.
Okay.
So looking at simFBA. First of all, thanks for doing this.
Oh, thanks for having me.
What's kind of your overall philosophy when it comes to building AppState?
Yeah, so my overall philosophy, at least going into this season, as a first-year head coach, was let's take a look at what we have and go from there. So I've been pretty vocal about who I believe on AppState are these game changers. And on the offensive side, we've got Ramon Bryce, fullback. He's fantastic. He's amazing. He was our Sage's preseason for AppState. He was our best player, and he was first team all Sun Belt. And it was basically, okay, we've got this amazing fullback. We've got a pretty amazing running back in Phil Turner. We've got a bunch of different pieces that of themselves are decent, but not comparable to, your bigger, more established program guys who have them all across the board. So
Right.
how do we unlock their talent? How do we put them in positions to succeed? And then let those other guys play their part as well. So I, at least going into the season, preseason, testing out a couple of primarily running-based offensive formations. So I think I started off against, an FCS team, Bucknell, with a wing tee. Pretty standard. Here we go, let's try it. Run, pass, do a little bit of both. Quickly realized that's pretty good, but if I want to really unlock what I've got, which are two pretty good running backs and a fullback, and have a sort of 1-2-3 running game, keep folks guessing, maybe we can pass with some wide receivers we got,
Right.
that the wishbone was the best way forward for us. Because we could get the best amount of our players onto the field at any point in time. And if we have our best players out there and we mix up our gameplay here, there, and everywhere with who's going to run the ball this time, where are they going to run to? Are we going to pass the ball? Because we do have some pretty strong tight ends, wide receivers out there, and a quarterback who may not be the most talented guy on the field, but he knows what he's doing. He knows who to throw to, when to throw to them. He knows when to hand the ball off. He's not the quickest guy, but he might see a gap and go for it. And at least the way we were building that offense was, let's get all those guys out there, see what they can do with their natural ability, their natural strengths, and let the other guys help them out along the way. Defense was pretty similar. We basically just went, hey, who are the best guys we have? Let's put them out there. Let's use them in a way that works. Something that we decided to do later on in the season was be a lot more aggressive defensively. And I think, at least for us, that's paid dividends. We've gone from, not necessarily blowing games, but, we weren't the best second half team. I believe in the first game of the season against Indiana, we had a pretty great first half. Second half, we were outscored 14-0. Same thing with Kentucky, second game of the season. It was a battle back and forth, but we were outscored by, I think, at least 2 scores in the second half. We wanted to be more aggressive. We were playing on the, backs of our feet a little bit towards the beginning there, changed it up, and it's paid off for us going into the postseason.
Okay. And who do you got for postseason? What bowl game?
We are in the New Mexico Bowl against Oklahoma State under Coach Proletariat.
Oh, okay. Yeah, my old team, Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about that? Do you see that as probably a pretty challenging game for you guys, or is this one you think could go 50-50?
I think it's definitely going to be a challenge. I have the utmost faith in our abilities, but I think that this is a vote of confidence by those in charge of selecting for these bowls. Oklahoma State was a team that was consistently ranked throughout the season. They were 25, 23, 12 from weeks 2 to 4. They jumped back up in week 6 to 23. all the way up to 10 in week 7, back to 22 at week 10, and so on and so forth. And they've got these monumental wins on their resume. They beat TCU in week 6 by 10. They beat an Arizona State that, granted, has fallen off since, but by 4 in week 8. They kept it pretty close to Baylor in week 10. And, of course, they have the win against Oklahoma by 3 in week 14. So they've got some very strong wins on their resume. We're hoping to take a look and see what we can do to counter that, obviously. And I think that our team is talented enough to put up a good fight and contend for this game. Like, I don't think it's a written in the stars sort of situation of like Oklahoma State's definitely going to win. It's going to be a challenge. It's probably going to be our biggest challenge so far this season, but we're ready to meet it. And we're doing everything we can to be prepared for that with, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks off. And we're doing our research. And I think we're going to put out a good showing. And yeah, I'd love to come home with a trophy.
All right. So you mentioned Bryce, you mentioned Turner, just great people. And I've taken AppState people at Tennessee the last couple of years. So doing these, is there like any player that you just kind of showed up this year you weren't expecting to all of a sudden just bloom into something spectacular that's not named Bryce or Turner?
Yeah, this one's a bit of an outside shout. I'm going to give big focus onto our wide receiver, Jeff Lucas, here. And he has been, over the course of the season, our wide receiver 1. And in a very very run-heavy offense, he's been very patient and he's been very collegial about his role in the team and his playing time. And he's a sort of guy who's identified as this red zone threat. I know a lot of folks in the collegiate ranks aren't as hot on that kind of player, but he's this smart guy with this very strong body. And he's put up relatively good receiving stats for someone who doesn't receive the ball very often. He's got an average of, I think, 12 receiving yards per catch. He's got 5 receiving touchdowns, but the one that I think is hysterical and the one I think is really impressive is folks are making a big deal in the Big Ten. I think it was Illinois' fullback with 12 pancakes going into the Big Ten Player of the Year rankings. Jeff Lucas has 7 pancakes over the course of the season, too, as a wide receiver, and 0 sacks allowed, obviously, because he's coming off, and sitting in there. But he's a guy who's out blocking our tight ends usually, and he's helping play this role for App State of, if we want to go out on the outside and we want Phil Turner's speed or Ramon Bryce's just grit, and we just want them to power through and get, 4, 5, 6, possibly more yards towards Jeff Lucas's side. He has been such a team player. He's been that guy who can do it all on offense right now. And he's not going to get the same praise that a lot of these other guys are. So I really want to highlight his efforts. He's 6'3", 224. He's a big guy. And I just want to highlight the fact that he's been such a consistent player for us as both a receiver and in his sort of new role as this like wide side blocker. And I just want to show the guys some love.
Yeah, definitely. I understand that being an Army veteran, West Point's always a team I pay attention to. And I know Jeff Monken in real life is like, hey, receivers, you're graded on how many pancakes you get. So to hear that in a sim is really cool. I really like it. And I always think that people lean too much into certain schemes or archetypes or whatever. So having these people that you've got with this offense, I mean, how did you go about approaching game planning every week?
Taking a look at some of the resources I think that the other more established coaches have has been really helpful. I tried to see what we were good at, right? Because there's always planning like, what is my opponent's biggest weakness? We're going to just attack that. Something I've always said over the course of the season is we're going to play our game, and that's going to win us football games. And as much as preparing for your opponent's a big key, we're going to play to our strengths here. Like if we know a certain play or a certain, formation going into the offense works best for us, we're going to do it. And we're going to challenge you to stop us, sort of thing. Like if I know that, hey, if we hand off the ball to, let's say Ramon or Phil or even Wenyan, Clinton, Dix. Here, oh, we're gonna gain at least 3 yards. And not a huge math guy myself, but you got 4 downs. If you're getting 3 yards every down, you're gonna score eventually. It's gonna take a long time. It's gonna take the longest drive in human history, but you're gonna do it. And for us, approaching a lot of game plans was, okay, what works best for us? And seeing how we can vary those up, right? Because a lot of folks are going to take a look at what we do as well. They're going to be like, okay, well, let's stop their strengths. Well, if we've got a handful across running, passing, here, there, everywhere, and we vary that up, if we play to our strengths and we do that on a consistent basis, but using a variety of different things, we want to keep people on their toes and guessing about what we're going to do next. And on the defensive side of the ball, again, I think that aggression. I said it when we were talking about, our season thus far. I think we're going to keep staying aggressive. We play with a certain set of personnel when it comes to matching up against offenses, and we play with this untapped aggression from, I believe, about mid-season, if not 2/3 the season through. It was like, let's just get more aggressive and see where it goes. And it's paid off. And we weren't playing necessarily slouches of teams either. So it's one of those things where I'm like, all right, that's the vote of confidence we needed. Let's keep going, sort of thing. So that's our main set of preparation.
Okay, so basically you're saying you prioritize the offense first and then defense?
In terms of how we're going to do our thing, I think the offensive game renders itself a bit more nuanced than the defensive game, given the fact that we're going with aggression as our main focal point for the defense. How we counter an offense is it's less nuanced based on that principle alone. If we're playing offense versus their defense, I'm more concerned with what we're going to do, sort of thing. And that's where that difference comes in. I'm not sure if that made sense to your question, but
yeah, it makes sense. So okay. I guess kind of looking, because I'm kind of the same way. It's like, okay, I plan my offense and I just fucking blitz the shit out of you on defense, because I won't on offense play a meta, like, because the current meta is air raid and chuck or vertical and just chuck the ball along.
Right.
On offense, no. Depending, Wisconsin, I would chuck the ball along. Titans, not so much, because I don't have a strong arm quarterback. Well, this week with Alexander, maybe. I don't know. His numbers aren't revealed yet, so that's part of the reason why he's playing. Is just kind of this idea that I'm contrarian on one side, but the other side, you're playing the meta, which is everybody's figured out this year. You blitz the shit out of people.
Yeah. And again, without lifting the veil too much, I've also found that, again, if folks are really going to lean into this passing game, I'm not going to give you all the time in the world. Your quarterback's got to make a decision. And I trust every single guy on my team out there to make a play. So, if you're blitzing, 1 extra, 2 extra, 3 extra guys, I've got the utmost confidence in the guys who aren't blitzing to make a play if the quarterback gets a good ball off. And if he gets a bad ball off, I've got even more confidence in their ability to capitalize on that.
Right. Yeah. So basically, that's how you stay up on top of the latest trends inside the sim, then.
Functionally, and I think it's helped our defense immensely in the past however many weeks. Our tackles for loss have gone up, our sacks have gone up, our interceptions have gone up, our pass deflections have gone up. Everything's gone up, right, in terms of our stats. So it seems to work especially well for us. We've got a really talented defensive line, so putting a lot more confidence in them to break through and have that sort of personnel assisting them. Our secondary has been amazing all season. So at least on the defensive side of the ball, that's just the way we've been operating as of the past few weeks. Okay. I say past few weeks, past few regular season weeks. It's been a few weeks since then.
Yeah, I was going to say it's been a little bit since some of us have played. It's like, okay, let's go shake off some rust. No.
Oh, we've been practicing, don't worry.
Well, I understand it. NCAA limits know what you can do with athletes, right?
Right.
So kind of looking at this, what you're doing here. And you kind of approach it a little bit like a lot of us do. It's like, hey, what do we do well? Who do we got? What do we got coming up? How do we? And some of the more elite people in the sim are like, okay, I'm building to this over time. That's why you see as they're recruiting stuff. So how do you approach recruiting, being that this is your first year at AppState?
Yeah, so our recruiting approach, it was, again, very similar in a way to how do we utilize our best personnel. So it was taking a lot of, okay, we got our seniors out there, we got our juniors out there. Who's going to probably stick around? Let's start seeking, number one, if the systems that they'd fit in make sense. Number two, what sort of complementary players can we recruit if that system makes sense to like make this our system going forward, sort of thing. So one thing that made a part of the decision for me is we've got a fantastic junior at defensive end right now, Mike Ruiz. He's been playing out of his skin beyond what his rating might suggest. And okay, let's go get some complementarily like defensive linemen, because we are going to lose a couple players. We're going to lose Doris Burns on the other end, graduating. We're going to lose Jamont Hardaway, also graduating. So let's go take a look at like, okay, how do we fill those roles? And again, one guy that really stuck out to me originally recruiting was Eric Smith at a High Point, 5-star.
Yeah,
B.
Everybody was on him.
Yeah, it was a big coup for us, honestly, to convince him like, hey, stay in state, come on down, let's do something special here. And would I say we got lucky with it? Yeah, of course, a little bit, but I think he's really buying into our system of like, oh yeah, I can go and make a difference straight out the gate, first of all, because I do truly see Eric starting, at least in the spring games, if not when the regular season starts next season for AppState.
Right.
Because of his just sheer ability. And I think it's like, okay, let's replace those guys that are leaving, which is a sad thing to do, but it's an eventuality. Let's just get some folks who would fit these systems going forward. So it's a little bit of both, if that makes sense.
Right.
You were saying like a lot of these more elite programs, they have these 2, 3, 4-year plans. They're planning for the future. Coming in, seeing what talent was already there, it's like, okay, how do we play for this year? And how do we play for like the next 2-3 years? Were two separate plans of, let's do what we got now, game plan that way, play that way. Let's take a look at all the guys who are going to be rising seniors, see what their strengths are, and that's how we're going to recruit, is we're going to complement what we've got. And I think with the introduction of the transfer portal, that's going to make it even more interesting with how many roster spots are going to be left open, and seeing what kind of guys we can add into the squad that way.
Interesting. So I guess short-term versus long-term, what's kind of, you're playing short-term, but are you planning on staying with the wishbone and kind of playing into the transfer portal to build the long-term vision you have for AppState?
Yeah, I don't want to lift too much into schemes themselves, because obviously we're going to leave some doors open going into next year regarding scheme. But if folks want to speculate, they can take a quick look at what the recruiting has been like and make a pretty educated guess going forward as to what sort of offensive scheme we'll be sticking with or will be running. And we're still working with what we got. We still have one more game. So going into that bowl game, the focus is still what we've got now. We're not as focused in this current point in time on, what scheme we get running next year, what sort of personnel we get running next year. We're focused on, week 17 as it stands. And then we'll answer those sort of questions going forward after that.
So your plan is to adapt your scheme every year to your players, or do you have kind of like a base? Like you said, you want to be very run focused versus meta.
Yeah, again, I think it depends on the personnel, honestly, because yes, you can have a scheme and an idea in your head, but that's got to survive first contact, right? So we were willing to adapt first spring game, cool, wing T worked great, but let's try the wishbone. Wishbone worked even better. Played it again, third game against SMU team, pretty talented team. Non-Sun Belt. So we were like, that's a good metric on teams that are going to be better than us. It worked against teams that are going to be better than us. Let's keep running it. And that's how we went through. And it kept working. I mean, in terms of offensive production, speaking of the wishbone itself, right? Like, I mean, we put up 38 points against Kentucky away.
Right.
Like,
I saw that.
In my head, I'm like, you know what? If we can put up 38 points against an SEC team, ranked 21, which I considered to be low at the time, away, this offense is going to work. And it's continued to pay dividends. I mean, our average scoring started to shoot up once we really fell into the groove there and culminated in, I think, a 52 points against James Madison. So it's having an idea in our head. Obviously, you want to figure that stuff out before any penalties come into play, but also the willingness to adapt if it doesn't.
Right.
Because, some players might prove to be better in certain situations than others, and you just got to be both able and willing to sometimes make that sacrifice for the team as a whole, as opposed to sticking with, your set strategy, your set mentality all the way through.
Right, because I'm just kind of looking. People looking here go, why is he looking? Say, well, I have two monitors, so I'm looking at the spreadsheet of the recruits if you've grabbed already. Because I see you're in against Temple and Utah and a couple of 3-stars. But I noticed that you picked up a scrambler quarterback.
We did.
And a speed running back. Are you thinking spread option eventually, or are you thinking maybe something more staying on the ground game type of option?
I'm thinking versatility would help us. We've already got a couple scramblers on the roster going into next year. We wanted to, again, maximize what we've got currently and then add on to it. So we've got Gino Wimmers. He's a rising senior going up. He's the most talented quarterback remaining on the roster after Austin Redding's graduation this year. We've got a freshman who's taken the red shirt, Danilo Divers. He's a scrambler as well. So in terms of who we were targeting, Richard Gapinski was that sort of, okay, let's bring someone else in. Let's have them compete to see what we got here at the quarterback position.
So I guess when you're looking at this, how much is overall and potential playing into these? Because I know Gapinski's like a C plus type guy.
Yeah.
So how does he relate to what you've currently got there? Is he a step up? Because I know he's a 4-star. I think most of your team is probably 3s and 2s?
3s and 2s relatively. I believe that of those two quarterbacks, I'm just going to make sure and check. Of those two quarterbacks I already mentioned that are currently rostered, we have Gino as a C+, but an A potential, but he hasn't really gotten much playing time over the course of his career. Right. And then we got a CC in Divers. So in terms of how that really plays out, again, it's folks are going to develop when they're on the field or not, sort of thing. And I think we said it off camera, and I'll say it again. Potential doesn't mean shit if your guys aren't getting out there on the field. And our intention is to have all three of these guys play in the preseason, develop, see what we got, see what works, see how they fit into the offense we're going to potentially try to run, and then go from there on our decision of who is the best for it. And, for all I know, we could take a look at it and go, we're actually not going to go with any of these guys. We're going to go with somebody else. Like, that's not something where, myself and my staff aren't hardwired to say, oh, well, we're attached to a sinking ship. We're not. Like, we are versatile enough to make that change if we need to. But that's the way we're going to, start looking at things. Yeah,
like I said, just kind of looking at your recruits here, and I don't want to get into the math because there's some people like, well, if I do this many points this week, I get this, and I get that. But it's like, I'm sorry, people get a freaking wife and get a girlfriend.
Yeah.
It's like, I understand it. There's a game, there's a meta to it, but I'm just kind of looking at this. How much did stars versus distance versus overall versus maybe the affinities that are there Because obviously AppState's got different affinities. And then did you look at things like the personality stuff, like the recruiting bias, the academic bias, the work ethics, that type of stuff? Did any of that play into it?
Again, I think it's an overarching yes to all of that, right? So my main approach was I wanted to keep guys that were close to home. We're a family sort of program, like every guy knows each other kind of thing. So having a lot of guys from the surrounding area was not something the previous coaches targeted. It's
Right.
something I wanted to. It gives you that leg up when it comes to affinities, especially if someone wants to stay close to home.
Right.
And granted, I know that North Carolina, Virginia, it's a big recruiting ground with a lot of teams who are obviously working the same way.
With two really good coaches too.
Yeah.
Both human controlled.
Correct. And I'm just saying the states of, but yes, the programs, the Tar Heels and the Cavaliers have done fantastic this season. But when it came down to it at the end of the day, who we were targeting and why, it was players that we wanted for terms of replacement of outgoing players, for terms of I want this guy to play starting next season. It was who do we want right now? And that was, you mentioned like point allocation and spreadsheets, and no. If we wanted a guy, we were going for him. Like we're not afraid of fighting other schools for somebody. I know that other schools are like, oh, I see someone on them. I see a program on them. I'll back off. No, not with us. If we see another program on there, we're going to fight you. We're going to fight you for that guy because he's our guy. And granted, that does lead to some recruiting losses, and a lot of folks they really care about that ranking and that like win-loss record. If we lose a guy, there are 3-4 other guys we're going to go after that can fill that role. Like, yeah, we would have wanted, X player, but if Y and Z are still available, and I know they are because we're still keeping tabs on them, we're going to go for them next. And that was the sort of approach that we took in terms of, who do we want to target right now? And it was, we're going to target these guys that we want just down the line. And it was, again, to fill gaps, to go towards potential future schemes. It was guys that just looked impressive, that were like, all right, cool, this guy we can find a space for him in our system. And that's just the way we took it.
Right. Like I said, just kind of looking things over here, and you got kind of an approach. You and I are very similar kind of in how we approach things. At Wisconsin, I was like, okay, I want people to fit my scheme. Where you're like, I want them to be the family, then I'll adjust the scheme around them. So it's kind of similar in those approaches. I noticed just kind of something here, just looking at your roster and looking at this, okay, you got a ball hawk in there, you got a pass blocking lineman, you're looking at a coverage linebacker, but you're looking at run stoppers on defense. But the thing that really caught my attention was the fact it was two people.
Okay.
A triple threat athlete and a nose tackle. Are you switching from a 4-man front to a 3-man front, or are you already in a 3-man front?
So we are currently in a 4-man front. And the reason for those players in particular, when it comes to Christopher Allen, the nose tackle, again, from Lincoln, North Carolina, I like the stuff. I liked him on paper. And again, he's going to be a freshman. That means he's got 4 to 5 years of being with the program. And when it comes to players we have now and how we're going to go down in the future, I want to have him play. I want to see him evaluated. And then if we make the change to a 3-man front where he's a lot more suited, that's something we'll end up doing. If it's something where we have to say, like, hey, bud, I know you're more of a nose tackle, but we need you to play in a 2-man system. Sort of like the Jeff Lucas mold of like, hey, I know you're a wide receiver, but I'm going to turn you functionally into a tight end.
Right.
Like, we expect these guys, because we go after these guys for their team value. We expect these guys to say, like, yes, coach. Say more, coach. What next, coach? And yeah, that was the Allen mold. And then triple threat. Look, I'm just saying, this is the talented looking guy. Like, I want him. Because he can, again, fit that versatility.
Right.
I'm like, I just want him. Like, Douglas Lilly, Franklin, North Carolina boy with some good potential. I'm like, you know what? I want him, sort of thing.
Yeah, he has great potential. I will say this right now. Not to cut you off, but great potential, but he skips legs day. That's what it says here. Skips leg day. is he really going to have the leg strength to do what you need him to do?
I guess we're gonna find out, because I mean he's obviously a smart guy. He takes AP classes that says that
I
too.
saw
Maybe
that too.
Maybe he figures that part out. Maybe it takes him a season to figure it out.
Smarter versus stronger. Got it.
Again, maybe it takes a season to figure it out. Maybe he makes up for that lack of leg strength with his head. I mean, he's a relatively big guy, 6'2", 204, but something that we looked at, right? He was talented, versatile, but he wanted to stay close to home, and he wanted to play football in a small town. And, say no more. That's who we are. Come on down. Come on home.
Definitely.
Meet your brothers, and maybe you'll learn something about leg day going forward.
I got that. So I guess this kind of lends a question. How do you approach redshirting then? And then how will that affect transfer portal for you as well?
Yeah, I think approaching redshirting will be a sort of who we see in our future, right? But again, not necessarily right now. And this will depend on the player, because if a player says, "Hey, coach, toss a redshirt on me, and I'll transfer," right? Like, first of all, I don't want to I don't like to think that any of our guys are like that, because again, team game, team mentality. But if someone says like, "Hey, I'm coming in here, and we've got this absolute stud at the position in front of him," right? I'd like to think we have the candid conversation of, "Hey, take one extra year. Take an extra year to develop your skills, because I know what you got. Literally next year, it's your show." That player will be like, "Okay, coach said it's my show next year. I'm going to stick around. I'm going to practice. I'm going to learn. I'm going to learn from that guy ahead of me, because he's clearly very good. And I'm going to progress my own way. And then I get to play my game for 4 years, or I get to play my game for 3 years, or even 2 years." Like, I don't see it functionally be willing if you're only going to redshirt a guy to play one season. That just seems wasteful to me in that sense. And I don't think we're at the point with AppState that was going to happen. I think every single person that we redshirted was a freshman or a sophomore, depending on where they were at their skill level, where they were with what we noticed going in. Because we did make good use of it. We used all 15. And we target them in areas of, okay, these are talented players that we like going forward for whatever metric. But right now, we've got some really talented folks ahead of them. So let's give them a year to really learn, and then go from there.
All right. So what's been your proudest moment so far at AppState?
Let's see. Proudest moment. I love Coach JC. And I've spoken very highly of him, but I think it's got to be the statement win over JMU. They were considered a very strong team. I mean, they had the National Defensive Player of the Year earlier in the year. And in a conference divisional do or die kind of game, because it was one of those things where we were going up and down, wins and losses depending on the teams. And it was really a question of where we would finish. First in the Sun Belt, and second in terms of bowl eligibility going into that week 12. And to go out there and play just an immaculate game of football. I mean, run, pass, everything was beautiful and perfect, more than we could have hoped for. As senior night too, it was lovely. It was beautiful. You just can't help being romantic about football sometimes. I mean, Austin Redding, 6 for 6, 120 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ramon Bryce, 200 yards. Phil Turner, 100 yards, 3 touchdowns. Offensive Player of the Year, Offensive Player of the Week nod. Defensively, 7 sacks against one of the more high-powered quarterbacks right now in the Sun Belt. It just felt good, and we were hoping to carry that momentum into the final game, which we did. Came out 2 wins to finish 7-5 on the season, and again, it's that sort of momentum that we're hoping to carry into the bowl game.
Great. Speaking of bowl games, we've had some play already, and we got some going right now.
We do.
Kind of like me, is like, we don't care about the live, just show me the spreadsheet. So kind of looking back at Ole Miss, human team losing to UMass. What's your take on that?
Well, first of all, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I just literally popped in my head as I said, like, oh, hey, follow up question is, do you think there is an advantage of a human team versus an AI in a situation like that?
I think it depends, obviously. I mean, UMass, well, first of all, Ole Miss came in as the sort of like odd man out of, that they're there to even up the numbers, right? I think that was said by the bowl committees and such. Like, yeah, we had an odd number of teams. Here's the top 5 and 7 team with a strength of schedule. Awesome. So I don't know if that's the players on the Rebels weren't, necessarily prepared to play in a bowl game, but I want to give more credit, I think, to UMass, right? I mean, they've shown that they've got some ability throughout the year, right? With, I think it's DJ Machado, right, at quarterback. He's, running around in a flex bone. And I've said some very strong things positively about the flex bone system implemented this year across a couple of teams now. And I just think that when it works, it works. And it clearly worked against Ole Miss. But let's not forget who some of like Massachusetts wins have been against. I mean, we have that week 8 win against number 16 Washington State in Pullman, 30-21. Like, that's big. They came out and beat Pitt in week 13. So like, they're not a slouch program, even if, they're not airing the ball out. I think I'm looking at the Pitt box score right now. DJ Machado went 3 for 9, 48 yards. Unremarkable. But he ran for 189 yards and 2 touchdowns. Like, if he's on his game, he's on his game. And again, in this bowl game against Ole Miss, he clearly was. And, I don't think that's a knock to Ole Miss. I think it's honestly a testament to their defense that they were actually able to hold UMass to 19 points as opposed to these other games where they're playing, these, quote, higher opposition, that they were scoring even more. So to hold Machado to 110, to hold Pino to 109 and a touchdown, these guys are, I think, averaging in the season, I want to go and check this now, because I want to say he's one of the higher up quarterbacks in rushing stats. And I believe, Machado's got 1,630 yards. He's averaging 8.53 rush, like, yards per attempt, which is better than a lot of running backs. And he's only, I think, fourth. It's Nebel, Pat Niang, Alvin Coates out of Colgate, who I think has been slept on this entire season, and then himself as rushing quarterbacks, versatile quarterbacks in that mold. And I think it's more of a testament to that team just being a sleeper in terms of how good they are than Ole Miss being a 5-7 plug-in team.
Right. Yeah, because I remember they were 5-7 plug-in team, and I remember the conversation. But I guess the question is really, how much does human coaching versus AI coaching? I guess that's something we're going to see, because with AI coaches and schemes this year is kind of new. See how that kind of plays out. But the game I really want to get to is the Fenway Bowl between Temple and JMU. 14-13. Looked like a game just from reading the box scores and just reading the play-by-play off the spreadsheet, because I work kind of weird hours, so I'm usually in bed early, so I don't get to see some of this stuff, or because of work I don't get to see it. But what's your take on that? Because you said you were really proud of beating James Madison, and part of me is like, you beat a British coach too. I mean, he knows football, but does he know American football? And I love JC. He's a great guy. He and I have just ribbed each other for a long time. But JC, I think you do a great job. But you are Brit. Sorry. But Seti Toes has got Temple kind of on an upward trajectory as well. How big is that 1-point win really get against JMU? I mean, JMU has been ranked most of the year. Has been in consideration for a lot of things. You beating them, and then Temple have a good game like this. How much do you see the fact that the traditional real life elites aren't the elites anymore? It's whoever's controlling the team. How are you seeing those kind of play out with this win? in the Fenway Bowl by Temple.
Yeah, first of all, I want to address again, love JC, great coach. There have been a lot of conversations about JMU, being a great defensive team as of, I think, week 3 was the week that their linebacker won Defensive Player of the Week. And they've done, throughout the season, a pretty solid defensive job. There are, flashes here or there, depending on the team. And frankly, it seems like, if I'm going to go so far as to just say something out there, is it's a lot against rushing teams. So Marshall, actually, let's go even further. Texas State, right, beat them 31-16 in week 8. They're a lot more on the ground. Devin Holtz, I would say, is, Sunbelt first-team quarterback. He was slinging the ball. He was running the ball. In that game, he put up 274 passing yards, 133 rushing yards, alongside his running back at 163. Marshall has Tremaine Craig, possibly, I would consider the best running back in the country. 209 yards, 2 touchdowns going into there, and his backup had 87, just playing the 1-2 game. UMass, another UMass win, was 42-17. DJ Machado put up 228 yards in that game, 2 touchdowns. And then AppState, obviously, we're running the ball a lot more than we're passing it. We had 300 and change yards on the ground. So I think that was an area of JMU's game that was their weakness. And it's one that I don't think Temple particularly made full use of. They clearly did a decent amount. They had 148 yards by Miles Wheelan on the ground. But they kept running into the sort of passing, or that passing wall that JMU puts up. I mean, Marcus Jefferson, 2 touchdowns, no interceptions, but he's only averaging 3.8 yards per attempt. He's 17 for 31. That's just above 50%. And JMU, to counter them, 326 yards by Framber Jenkins, but again, only 13 points, just one touchdown. And I'm actually it's really hard for me to evaluate this game because I'm hot on JMU as a overachieving team. I think I said it in the hot seat episode, is that Coach JC's working with a team of B overalls and lower. There's nobody above a B because of their quote promotion from FCS to FBS. Right. And I'm also very hot on Temple as a team. I think they've, underachieved necessarily in the over the season, but not necessarily something that's their own fault. I think they've gotten a bad shake of a couple games. I also think I went into this when talking about Coach Sandy Toes, and they lost by 3 to Houston in week 2. They lost to 3 by Tulsa in week 7. They lost to 3 to UCF in week 13. So that's a team that, ended the season with a 6-6 record that very easily could have been 9-3.
Right.
Or any combination thereof. And, to the, karmic gods, them pulling out a close win against JMU is almost satisfying. But it's one of those things that you kind of wonder if it should have been more. And this game really could have gone either way. I'm not sure if you noticed in the box score. I'm sure you did, but we had 4 missed field goals in this game.
Yep.
Two by each team. And I'm like, this game was, I think, a testament just to grit. This was such defensive football from the second the whistle blew for the second half. Because I remember going back, because I didn't catch the game live. I remember going back and looking, when was the last time these teams scored? What was going on? And it was just missed field goal, turnover, missed field goal, this, that. And I'm just like, wow. The defensive stature, obviously, very good for both teams. Bend, don't break. You can give up a lot of a lot of yards, excuse me. And it doesn't matter if no points are put on the board.
Right.
But that's the way that I'm gonna summarize it. Is it just turned into this defensive slog. I would like to focus on that, as both coaches having a great defensive game plan in terms of we're just gonna bend, don't break, have them get close, and then deal with the kicking woes that a lot of folks have felt this season of, field goals just coming up short. And it worked out for Temple. And, I've got every confidence of them going into next season. They've got a really, really talented quarterback coming their way. And in terms of JMU and Coach JC, I think they're, the only way is up for them. Their players are getting better because he's just putting it out on the field. And they're only going to get better.
All right. So a quick one for you. We talked a little bit before this off camera when you were interviewing me. Is how come you're not in the NFL yet?
Oh, for me, it's more of I wanted to refine my game and focus on one thing first. I mean, my work-life balance is relatively good, but again, I want to keep my personal life as well. But mainly, it was getting a hold of the college game first, understanding what goes into that, and then maybe take a look at the pro ranks a little later. I know the seasons run functionally in tandem, so it's not going to be possible to jump in this current season to have any particular impact, and I don't look to. But it's mainly been a build my game, refine my game, develop my own style, and go from there.
Right. So last question before we do the question was given to us.
Sure.
Notre Dame, Georgia Tech this afternoon.
Oh boy.
Gator Bowl. Who do you got?
I've actually prepped this. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but I did prep this. I'd like to preface this, as I always do when I talk so much about Notre Dame. I'm a Notre Dame alum. I have a soft spot for the Irish. I think they come out on top in this game. And I know that is probably going to bite the Irish in the ass, because of their playoff woes last year against Marshall. I think they were, the number 5, lost number 12.
Yep.
I just think that the Irish defense turns it on. I think the Irish defense turns it on against the high-flying Landrum. I think that Georgia Tech, while amazing to watch, and that comeback in the ACC championship game, my God, was insane.
Right.
But if I'm Coach Little Butt and I'm Notre Dame, this Georgia Tech offense is one-dimensional, and it has been proven to be stopped before, and I think they've got the defensive prowess to do it. On the flip side, I'm going to also make my case for, I'm going to call him IP, quarterback for Notre Dame, as a pretty good quarterback. I know that we just had some statistics come out about clutch rating and whatnot, and I'm just going to say that I don't necessarily believe in those at face value. Because I'm going to rattle off a couple of statistics that I really like for him against one of the most, we say bend don't, we were talking about bend don't break in terms of defenses, right? And in terms of defenses in the country, Georgia Tech has given up the most yards allowed by a wide margin. It's 6,623. The closest other defense was Charlotte at 6,100. That's 500 yards more yards allowed over the course of the season than anybody else. Granted, they do have that 13th game in there, but it's something to be said. And it's not like their points allowed is, off the front page. If we're looking at the statistics for the teams, they're 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8th with 411. And I think that there's a quarterback out there in Notre Dame's IP who can exploit that. Because let's just take a look at him to his contemporaries, and even against Landrum, right? So I pulled up some little stats, right? He's got 127 less attempts than Landrum, 80 less completions, and that's a testament to his 72.46% completion rate, which is insane. Right. Yeah, he's got 2,500 less yards, but that's just because Landrum is the guy in terms of Georgia Tech's offense. The offense at Georgia Tech lives and dies by Landrum in the long ball.
Right.
Because he's throwing 161 more yards than IP every game. So I'd like to think, okay, if we talk about schemes, talk about a lot of things. What if we put him up against a comparable peer? And as we see down the NCAA statistics, it's a lot of pocket guys, a couple of balanced guys. We don't get to another guy like IP until Michigan's Bobo Smith. And that's where the comparison really starts to swing more IP's way in how good he really is. Granted, he's got the talent around him, but, you know, all that talent around you is nothing if you can't make that pass, and he's making 72% of them. So against his closest contemporary, he's got 987 more yards with 29 less attempts and 8 less completions. Makes sense. He's 2.46% more accurate. He's thrown 1 more interception, but he has thrown 25 more touchdown passes. And for those math folks playing along at home, that's 150 more guaranteed points.
Right.
Alone.
One moment, please.
And yeah, no problem.
All right. So here's a quick question for you.
Sure.
We'll cut out the space on the editing part. So this is not the final question, but just quick one, because you're talking quarterbacks. I was literally just looking through this earlier today, looking at all the 4-stars and 5-star quarterbacks that are seniors or redshirt seniors. Looking at this stuff, 4 stars, 5 stars, all quarterback archetypes. You were talking about stats. Landrum has 90 quarterback sacks. The next closest guy is Bozeman from Duke with 51. So something to think of. Yeah, he throws a lot. He's going to hit a lot, but that's part of the meta, I think, to check the ball along. Right. You're going to throw interceptions, get sacked, but you're going to score a ton of lot. All right. So one of the traditions I have is the last person I talked with about something related to sim leaves a question for the next person, not knowing who it's going to be. And it can be about the sim, it could be about, just life in general. You're new this year. This is your first year doing this. What advice would you give to a new owner or new coach of a team that's just starting out?
My advice would be, it's 2-part. Number one is, don't have an ego at all. You got to come in here humble, because there are a lot of guys who've been doing this a lot longer than you and a lot better than you. You're not going to come in and be this brand new superstar coach who's going to light up the league and be coach of the year your first year. Don't even try and shoot for that in that sense, because the second part of my advice would be ask around and don't be afraid to learn. I think after my first week in charge of AppState, I reached out to Pierce, who was my opponent. I was like, hey, great game. What would you recommend? Taking a look at both of our teams, I really liked XYZ of Indiana. Just wanted to share that. Any advice you have for me? And he gave some pretty solid advice that I ended up using. And, over the course of the season, I didn't necessarily do that with opponents, but if some coach had an amazing game, or there was a team that I was really hot on, I would just reach out and be like, hey, I know we haven't talked. Great week for you. I like XYZ about your team. What do you think could work with mine? If you were in my position, what would you fine tune? What would you do to your approach? And not only building those bridges, but having the personality wave to then say, okay, this guy, his advice was better than what I was doing. Let's make that change. Or be like, I appreciate it. I might take that into consideration. I might not do it, sort of thing. But to have that openness to adapt, to have that openness to build bridges, meet everyone else in the sim, and then go and play your game from there, I think that's crucial for first year coaches. That'd be my biggest advice: is go out there, play your game, but be humble about it, make some friends along the way, and adapt from there. Be willing to.
Awesome. This has been a great talk. I know it's been almost an hour of us chatting here, but you got 2 long-winded people talking about a sport that they're
that's what's going to happen.
This, and to quote Pierce, and he gave me the right to say this is real people talking about fake sports.
Fake sports.
Yeah. Which is good because it's like, God, I wish I'd thought of that one for the wheels. Like, I love this show. Pierce is one of those guys I go to a lot, especially because I'm doing an Excel course. So I go to him and Sage a lot. Hey, help me put this over. Clem's the other one. Even though I compete against Clem in like literally every league. Since I did this, but I appreciate you taking time to do this. Just a moment. I'm going to let this record a little bit longer, but we're going to kill this here. Because part of the tradition is not knowing who's next. What question would you ask them?